Hello, everyone. It's the Ref here. Yeah, I just wanted to talk to you about something. I will hopefully record another of the Bible study on Matthew later today. But I was just visited by my friend Jared McKenna. Now, Jared's from Perth, Australia, and he's an amazing guy. He works very hard to to show the way of Jesus, the peaceful way of Jesus, the nonviolent way of Jesus. He founded a group called EPIC, which stands for Empowering Peacemakers in Your Community. And what they do is they go into schools and they teach young people alternatives to violence as a way of solving conflict and solving problems. And they teach them how to stand up and actually be counted as a group of people that want the world to recognize there's better ways of dealing with problems than by violence as well. And he draws a lot from the works of Gandhi, a lot from the works of Martin Luther King, a lot from the works of Jesus himself. And what he does is he basically shows in practical ways how we can be less violent as people. It's interesting. The reason I bring all this up is Jared and I were talking, and whenever we talk about nonviolence, there's one thing that always comes up. Actually, there's two things. The first is this idea that pacifism or the way of nonviolence means passiveism, which it isn't. Gandhi said that if the choice is between violence and cowardice, then to choose violence. This isn't about being a coward. This isn't about running away. I'm a former cage fighter and bullfighter. If there's anything I like to do is get in the way of problems. What nonviolence is not turning your back on conflict, but actually staring conflict in the face and seeking to find creative ways to resolve it without resorting to violence. So the first thing is it's always that are you just going to turn your back? And of course, that's not what Jesus wants. It's not what Gandhi or Martin Luther King ever suggested, and that's not what I'm suggesting at all either. But what Jared and I started talking about was this idea that everyone seems to bring up whenever you talk about the way of nonviolence is they imagine the most horrible possible situation. Um, and it usually goes in one of two directions. The one is they talk about Hitler. Okay, now if you look historically, you find that the nonviolent resistors to Hitler actually fared better in the war until the very end. But when you look at the nonviolent resistors throughout the Northern Europe and stuff, they actually they they wound up doing a better job at protecting their Jewish citizens, and they didn't wind up getting killed as much. They didn't fight the Germans, but they stood right up to the Germans and they said, "No, we're not going to hand over our Jewish people, and no, we're not going to do what you tell us. We're not going to fight you, but we're not going to do what you tell us either." And there's actually letters from German commanders that didn't know how to deal with this. They're like, well, if they fight us, we can kill them, but they're not fighting us. We don't know what to do. And they struggled with that. And these countries were actually more effective. Now, you can do some research, and you may or may disagree with that. But the specific thing that we were talking about was the other situation that always seems to come up. They say, yeah, but what if someone was going to murder your wife or your children? Or what if someone was going to rape your grandmother? Or what if someone, this person had a knife and they were going to do this and you had a gun and then would you be justified? And it's interesting to me that what people want to do is they want to make this just incredibly uh, horrible situation that thankfully most of us will never, ever, ever experience. And then they use that as a justification for everything else. Okay? Um, but I want to take that image on. Just, if they're going to use that, then let's look at that. Now, I'm a very skilled fighter. I'm a black belt in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. I've fought in mixed martial arts. I'm a big, strong guy who's very well trained. When it comes to physical confrontation, I can handle myself better than most. I've spent hours and hours and hours learning and training to get that way. Now, if I were to be a gun owner and wanted to use it in self-defense, if I was a responsible gun owner, like the NRA says everyone should be, then I would do the same thing, wouldn't I? I would spend hours learning how to use my weapon properly, learning how to use the proper ammunition, learning how to use it in correct situations, etc. So let's go back to this situation. We're in a situation where someone is going to hurt a loved one. And I am in a situation where I am trying to protect that loved one. And I'm deciding whether I'm going to use violence to do so. Now, my question is, what guarantee do I have that violence will work? Even with all my training, I could miss. I could just wound the person. They could injure the person I'm trying to save before I help them. Or maybe something happens and I actually injure the person I'm trying to save. Violence isn't 100%. It isn't 100% in war. It's not 100% in self-defense situation. It's a toss-up, and you don't know what's going to happen. But the one thing that is 100% is if I use violence, the violent perpetrator, there's no conversion for him. Whether I'm successful or whether I fail, I create a situation where that person continues to be the antagonizer and goes forth and continues to be filled with violence and hatred. Now, on the other hand, we think of, well, nonviolence. What am I going to do? I'm just going to stand there. I'm going to throw myself between them. I'm just going to see that's the biggest thing that I think people don't understand. When you've been schooled since you first could even think that the way to deal with bad men is violence, how can we think that we would need any less training for nonviolent action than we would for violent action? If I've spent literally thousands of hours learning how to be a good fighter, shouldn't I learn even more how to be a good nonviolence practitioner? The simplest little techniques, the simplest little ways of doing things, the way that you talk to somebody, the way that you instill someone's humanity in them. The idea of nonviolence is not only to not get hurt yourself and to save others from being hurt, but the idea of nonviolence is to also convert the one that is partaking in violence so that violence is no more, so that violence stops. And that even if you sacrifice your own life, that the possibility is that that person, through your own sacrifice, would be converted and stop being a violent man or woman. And it takes just as much training. It takes just as much mental fortitude. It takes just as much bravery to offer to give your life for somebody as it does to take a life for someone. In fact, I think it does more. Now, I know this is a controversial subject, and I'm happy to discuss it with you, but it was just something that was on my mind, and I thought I'd share it with you. So, thanks for listening.